Could time travel be real? The most brilliant minds in history seem to think so. Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein, and Stephen Hawking all proposed that time travel could be a thing in the future. And for decades, humanity has been pursuing this idea, hoping to turn it into a reality. But what if, secretly, time travel has already been achieved, all evidence of it buried, every witness brainwashed to keep quiet? Until one of them regained their memory and told the world all about the secret experiments the government is trying to bury, a secret that began decades before our time traveler was even born. A war of technology. During the Second World War, the superpowers around the world were in an arms race, and like any other war, it was clear the outcome would be decided by technology. Back then, the German war machine was extremely strong. Germany was winning, with chunks of Europe and Russia under its control. On the other hand, the US forces were clearly lacking. They were behind both technologically and in firepower. This power gap was concerning the Allied forces. It needed to be fixed fast if there was to be any hope of stopping the German advances in the battlefield. Realizing the urgency of the situation, the American military began working on several secret projects. Chief among them was the Tesla death ray. It was going to be a destructive beam-emitting device that could annihilate the enemy from far away. A sniper, but with the firepower of a bomb. The US tried desperately to work on the designs made by Tesla. But in the end, the project was a failure. What they didn't know at the time was that this failure was just a prelude to something much greater. Because Tesla had invented something far stranger and more useful, his patented electromechanical technology could be used in a way that no one could imagine. No one except Einstein himself. Einstein had proposed a theory that many found unbelievable at the time. Named the unified field theory, it stated that gravity could bend light.
Aimed at me.
That tends to happen when you make radical claims such as gravity bends light.
While it began as a theory, Einstein was able to prove that this would work. The military was immediately interested. After all, a technology that could make you invisible on the battlefield would be unstoppable. The US wanted to be that unstoppable, unseen beast. If they could pull it off, the war would essentially be over. The Germans couldn't fight an enemy they couldn't see. And so, a project was initialized based on the theory of Tesla and Einstein. Project Rainbow. Project Rainbow was launched in extreme secrecy. After all, its results could very well change how wars are fought. Only a select few knew what it was, and even fewer people were given the full picture. Behind closed doors, the experts started creating a machine. Its purpose was going to be extraordinary. It would combine Einstein's and Tesla's electromagnetic field findings to distort light in such a way that military crafts and ships could be made invisible. And this invisibility wouldn't have just been effective at making something invisible, but it would also prevent radars from scanning that object. Whatever was being cloaked by this tech would be impossible to find. Soon enough, the military had come up with a prototype, and it was time to do the first test. The subject would be a destroyer-class ship called the USS Eldridge, anchored off the shore of Philadelphia docks. On October 28, 1943, the ship was fitted with the machine, and a crew was placed aboard to handle its operations. With the flick of a switch, the machine hummed on, and the experiment began. Little did the people aboard know that things were about to turn into a complete nightmare. The witnesses watching from the shore described seeing something very strange. There was a green glow around the ship, covering it completely as soon as the machine was turned on. Moments later, the entire ship disappeared. But it hadn't gone invisible. Rather, it had been teleported. Somehow, the Eldridge had traveled through space and time from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia, in a matter of seconds, a 200-mile-long distance covered in a mere moment. The destroyer stayed at its new location for just a little while before disappearing again and reappearing at the Philadelphia docks. The researchers watching from afar started celebrating. Unaware of what had really happened, they were thinking the experiment had been a success. But when no signs of life came from the ship, the researchers became concerned. A team was sent out to find out why the crew was not making contact. As the boat sailed closer to the ship, the sound of screams was the first indication that something had gone horribly wrong. With fear in their hearts, the team climbed aboard, and what they found was enough to make anyone go insane. The teleportation had not been perfect. Some crew members had their hands or feet fused to the bulkheads. Some had experienced severe burns and radiation poisoning. Some just went completely insane, their brains unable to comprehend what had just happened. But the most gruesome fate was that of the few unlucky people who had rematerialized with their bodies turned inside out. Naturally, several crew members did not survive the ordeal, and when the researchers counted the crew members dead and alive, their count came up short. That's when reality set in. A handful of the people who had been aboard had gone missing completely. The experiment had been a partial success. The destroyer had gone invisible and even teleported. But the cost had been far too steep. For the military, however, that loss was acceptable. The experiment had served as proof of concept. Now, the scientists were tasked with improving the machine so it could function without causing such a catastrophe. The top experts on the military payroll were put to the task. Resources were poured in with a new passion. After years of hard work, the new version of the machine was completed, and once again, it was going to be tested on the same ship, USS Eldridge. Among the few survivors of the previous experiment that were still of sound mind were two brothers, Ed Cameron and Duncan Cameron. Both of them were ordered to take part in the second experiment. The preparations were complete. The ship was anchored off the shore, and the crew was manning their positions. The machine turned on with the familiar hum, and things went almost exactly as they did last time. The green glow engulfed the ship, and then, for the crew, the nightmare began anew. The entire ship jolted with an explosion. The machine was vibrating so fast that it broke loose from its mounting. At the same time, fires were breaking out on the ship in several places. Ed and Duncan tried desperately to hold on to the ship. In their hearts, they knew they were about to meet a horrible end. The ship had turned into a death trap. The two rushed to the main deck, only to see that the green glow had engulfed everything. Instead of risking it on the ship, the two decided to jump off to save their lives. They were expecting to land in the water with a splash, but instead, they fell on a hard surface. Things were happening far too fast, and before the brothers had time to think, powerful light beams were focused on them. The light was from a military helicopter. The military personnel picked up Ed and Duncan and transported them both to a building. Inside, they were taken to an office where a man who seemed oddly familiar talked with them. He told them that they were in the year 1983. The impossible had happened. The two brothers had somehow traveled to the future, and the man sitting in front of them was all the proof they needed that they had heard the truth. They both recognized him as John von Neumann, the man who had been in charge of the experiments they were a part of just moments ago. Only, the man sitting in front of them looked far older than they remembered. The reality of it all was undeniable, but the journey of the brothers was not over just yet. Montalk Project. Under the orders of John von Neumann, the two brothers were taken to a military site located at Montalk Point. It was a decommissioned radar station, but that was only a public front. In reality, this was the site where the US government was conducting some of its most secretive experiments. Ed and Duncan were taken down to the vaults underneath the Montalk Point, where they came across a strange sight. There were chair-like machines with complex machinery around them. At first sight, they looked right out of a science fiction book. However, these ones were very much real. Turns out the results from Project Rainbow experiments hadn't been scrapped as they should have been, despite the death toll. Instead, the project had continued here in this facility under the new name of the Montalk Project. Over the decades, with Ed and Duncan having lost traveling through time on the SS Eldridge, the technology had been perfected. A lot had happened. The government had come across unidentified flying objects believed to be of alien origin. These objects were studied, and experts came across a startling revelation. The aliens were not controlling these with control panels like we do with our tech. Instead, they were using a psychic connection to control the flying objects. A direct link using unknown technology made it possible to operate the complex machinery. In the secrecy granted to the project, the experts at Montauk had been able to reverse engineer the same technology. This alien tech, combined with our own advanced tech and Tesla's resonance theories, as well as the findings from the Rainbow experiments, allowed scientists to create something extraordinary. The chairs, as they were called, produced electromagnetic waves that created a resonance with the mind of the user. And by this method, the researchers had been able to gain control over the same phenomenon that had pushed SS Eldridge through time. It wasn't as volatile and dangerous anymore. The technology had finally been perfected. What had started as a search for making ships invisible had turned into a machine that could propel the user through time, into the future, and to the past through a psychic connection. Ed and Duncan couldn't believe what they were hearing, but the military hadn't revealed its secrets to them for no reason. The researchers knew that using these machines was not easy. Due to the experience Ed and Duncan had gone through, they were the perfect candidates. They had braved the storm of a time and survived not once, but twice. Their minds hadn't been broken like the others aboard the SS Eldridge. With their help, these machines could at last be used as they were designed to. The two hadn't been found by accident. they were tracked and expected to drop through time exactly where they did. And now, they were to be part of another experiment that could very well cost them their lives. Ed and Duncan were going to plug into the Montauk chairs and travel through time for the sake of research. Traveling in time. Ed and Duncan were ordered to operate the chairs, and what they experienced was truly mind-boggling. The Montauk chairs were designed to amplify the psychic energy of a human brain, and it could achieve a lot of things. They could see great distances, travel through time, and understand concepts and beings a human mind would not in normal circumstances. It didn't take long for the brothers to master the use of the machines, and soon enough, they were ordered to conduct their first time travel mission. Their destination was the year 2137. This would be the most horrifying journey of their entire life. Navigating through space and time itself, the two arrived at the decided year. They were hoping to see a marvelous metropolis filled with life and advanced technology from their imagination. But there were no flying cars and no robots, just a wasteland with cities in the distance, blown to bits. As they traveled, Ed and Duncan came across a few humans here and there who ignored the brothers completely. No one wanted to talk to them, as if they did not even have curiosity left in them. When a person at last agreed to tell them what had happened, the time travelers were shocked to hear what he had to say. A war had engulfed the world in the past, involving major superpowers like America, China, and Russia. And once nuclear power had been used, it spelled the end of civilization. There were no more governments since there was no major city left intact. Humanity had descended into chaos. These people were living in small tribes, each protecting their own using crude weapons. It was a depressing sight, yet an informative one. Still, the journey was not over. Through patience and experimentation, the brothers had figured out how to get farther and farther into the future. And they had decided to jump 300 years ahead to see how this dystopia turned out. The world they landed in was nothing like the one they had just left. It was full of life, and everyone they saw looked happy and content, the complete opposite of what they saw earlier. Turns out, the society was already recovering back when Ed and Duncan showed up in the year 2013-77, and in the 300 years since, they worked on developing technology, curing diseases, and improving lives. And now, there was no need for money or suffering. Everyone lived contentedly with robots and AIs taking care of them. The society didn't even have a government. Everything was managed by an AI that made all the decisions. Its priority was comfort for humans, and it was clear that it had been achieved. To rebuild society from scratch like that was impressive. By all accounts, this was a utopia. To the brothers, this was someplace from their dreams. There was peace, comfort, and security. The world they were standing in was completely different from the World War II they had been fighting not too long ago. And so a thought entered their mind. What if they didn't go back? What if they stayed here to live out their life? No more war, no more experiments, and no more seeing horrible things. Strange planets. Ed and Duncan spent 2 years in the future, living a life of peace and quiet. But there was one thing missing. They still thirsted to see what was ahead. They had decided not to go back, but they could go forward, and it was during this time that Duncan revealed something quite interesting. He had figured out a way to travel not just anywhere on Earth using the tech they had, but also on other planets. The brothers agreed to make the first trip together. They arrived on a planet that almost seemed like Earth, vegetation everywhere, but what they didn't know was that this was a mistake. Soon, they realized that a figure was watching them. It had reptilian features and slitted eyes. The sight spooked Ed and Duncan, and they tried desperately to go back. Ed succeeded, but Duncan did not. And when Ed woke up, he found himself in the Montauk chair, as if the time he had spent in the future hadn't happened at all. Turns out, they had not physically traveled to the future. Rather, only their minds had. Their bodies remained behind, lying in the Montauk chairs. While Ed's consciousness had returned, Duncan hadn't woken up. His health was deteriorating, and his mind was refusing to come back into the present. John von Neumann had a theory why. According to him, the excessive time traveling had caused tears through space and time. The only solution was for Ed to return to his original timeline. It would be a risky process, but if done right, he could destroy the machine that started it all, the one on SS Eldridge, and fix these anomalies in time and space. But as an appreciation, Ed's consciousness would be transferred to that of a baby and his body destroyed so that he couldn't remember anything of the future he had seen. Ed took on this task and agreed to complete the mission. He once again got into the Montauk chair and transported himself back to his original timeline. What happened after became a blur. He arrived at the ship and was able to finish what he started. Things got back to normal. Meanwhile, his consciousness was transferred to that of a newborn named Al Bielek. Strange dreams. The one in charge of the Montalk Project had made sure that after the transfer of his consciousness, Al Bielek would not remember anything from his past life, and that held true for a while. However, he soon started showing some concerning signs. He remembered a conversation held around him back when he was just 9 months old. By all accounts, he should not have had that memory as a normal infant. When Al was in school, his knowledge about things was far higher than that of others his age. He was known as the Walking Encyclopedia. It became clear that Al was incredibly intelligent. When he grew up, he chose to work in the Navy just like his older self. And when he returned, he completed his education and got a job as an electrical engineer. He was obsessed with fringe conspiracy theories like mind control and time travel. His tendencies were clearly leading him somewhere. But where? The answer came from a movie for all things. When Al was watching the Philadelphia experiment, his memories began to return. He started to remember all that had happened. The truth had surfaced once again, and Al couldn't believe he had forgotten such important things from his life. As he dug deeper into his old life, he started to meet people from back then. He met his brother, who was working with Dr. John von Neumann. He also met one of the researchers from the Montalk Project, named Preston Nichols. The two shared their stories and founded a close friendship. It soon became clear what had happened. Duncan, Preston, and even Neumann had been brainwashed, so they wouldn't remember their past. But that brainwashing had failed for all of them. They remembered their other lives. But only Preston and Al were willing to come forth with the information they had. Al went public with what he knew in 1989. He told the world everything: the time travel, the experiments, and the brutality of it all. He wanted justice. Justice for the exploitation and human rights abuses that the government had committed. But as expected, the people were wondering, was any of his story true? A problematic story. Al was doing radio interviews, public talks, and conferences, but not everyone believed what he was saying. After all, it sounds quite fantastical. And that brings us to today's world. Al has a small following. Many believe that he did indeed tell the truth. But there are some inconsistencies that make his claims quite doubtful. You see, the story that Al presented is awfully similar to the movie The Philadelphia Experiment. A lot of the details were downright the same. Not only that, but he changed his own story so much that it is difficult to keep track. He added parts where he wanted and removed things he had already claimed on just a whim. And not just minor changes either, since Al went after key points in his story. Several of the dates he mentioned were changed on the fly, not once, but several times. And then there were the photos he represented. Most of them were proven beyond a doubt to be either fake or of some other people entirely who had nothing to do with the experiments. The man was just giving random photographs and claiming they were real people. And remember John von Neumann? Turns out Neumann died way before the experiments even began because of cancer complications. Al claimed all these inconsistencies in his story were because of different timelines and time travel complexities. But despite that, he was gaining quite a following. Even the Navy office had to come forth and clarify that no such experiment involving time travel had ever happened. However, the biggest inconsistency has yet to come. When the experts checked the logs of the SS Eldridge, it became clear that what Al was saying simply couldn't be true. The destroyer vessel was out on a shakedown cruise when the experiment was allegedly being conducted, so the ship wasn't even in Philadelphia at the time. And it isn't just the Navy office claiming this. The people who served on SS Eldridge confirmed the account. The ship was nowhere near Philadelphia at the time, and even if it was, the whole teleportation can be explained quite easily. Turns out, the US was hiding the use of a canal system from German U-boats that could have easily allowed a ship to travel from Philadelphia to Norfolk in just a day. Only military ships were allowed through, and even that was kept a secret, so others had no way of knowing. Lastly, we have the probable explanation for the mystery machine on the SS Eldridge. Most experts say that the machine being described in Al's story could very well be just a degaussing experiment. Degaussing was a way to lower the electromagnetic signature of a ship, and this method was used extensively during World War II to protect against mines. Keeping all that in mind, it becomes clear that Al's tale is most likely just fiction. He may think it is real, he may very well be convinced that he has lived through these experiences, but the facts simply don't support his statements. Then again though, maybe it is all a cover-up. Maybe Al is telling the truth, and the government has changed their records just to make sure what he has to say doesn't seem legit, because, according to Al, the government cannot have him assassinated. He claims that his very existence is something that counters the effects of the time travel experiments through space and time. If he dies, those holes that were closed by his return would open up again and cause chaos. What do you think? Do you believe Al is telling the truth? Or is it all just fiction he has made up? His clever changing accounts certainly indicate the latter to be the case. I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments down below. I would love to read them all. And while you are at it, be sure to like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, goodbye and stay curious.